For 3 hours, a Boeing 737 flew over Greece with every single person on board already unconscious. The cause traced back to a single switch, left in the wrong position, hours before takeoff. Investigators found the crew had 3 separate chances to catch it. They missed every one. One flight attendant, holding a real pilot's license of his own, made it into the cockpit before the end. What he found there is on the record, in his own Mayday call. One honest rule before we start. Every quote, timestamp, and finding in this episode comes from the official Greek accident investigation report or from real court records. Where something is disputed or unproven, we'll say so on screen. 1:25 in the morning. A Boeing 737, tail number 5 Bravo DBY, lands at Larnaca after a flight in from London Heathrow. The cabin crew log a problem before anyone even leaves the aircraft. A ground engineer is called out, 44 years old, a freelance contractor, licensed in the UK. He inspects the door and runs a manual pressurization leak check by hand. At 3:15 a.m., he signs the aircraft back into service. His written log reads, "Nil defects, no leaks, no abnormal noises. The plane is cleared to fly again in a few hours." The official investigation would later find this was not a documented failure of his duty. It was one part of a much longer chain. But at 3:15 that morning, nobody yet knows the chain has already started. To understand what happened next, you have to understand the airline flying that plane. Helios Airways was Cyprus's first privately owned airline, established in 1999. Its own mission statement, on the record, was to be a profitable, low-fares airline. Its managing director once put it more bluntly, to fly at probably half the price. By 2004, the airline's owner had acquired it specifically to feed passengers into his own tour company. British aviation regulators audited Helios repeatedly in the years before the crash. Real findings, on the record: no proper in-house quality system, outdated manuals, incomplete training files, understaffed management. In November 2004, the airline came close to losing its operating certificate altogether. This is the airline and the culture behind the aircraft that landed at Larnaca that night in August. The aircraft itself already had a history. In December of 2004, this same plane suffered a sudden decompression on a completely different flight. A hole opened in a door seal. 3 passengers needed hospital treatment. Investigators at the time could never conclusively determine why. Between June and the second week of August 2005, the same plane racked up 9 separate technical write-ups for its cooling system. 9. In just over 2 months. None of this, on its own, grounded the aircraft. All of it, together, is the plane that took off from Larnaca at 9:07 that morning. 5 minutes after leaving the ground, the first alarm sounds. At 9:12 and 38 seconds, climbing through 12,000 feet, a warning horn sounds in the cockpit. It is the cabin altitude warning. The plane is losing pressure. Here is the design flaw nobody in that cockpit knew about. On this aircraft, the cabin altitude horn sounds exactly like a completely different warning, one that only ever matters on the ground, before takeoff. 2 minutes later, the captain radios the ground. His own words, on the record: the takeoff configuration warning is on, and the cooling equipment is showing normal and alternate offline. He has misread the one warning that could have saved every life on that plane as a completely different, harmless one. On the same call, the ground engineer from that night asks him directly, "Is the pressurization panel set to automatic?" The captain, already beginning to lose oxygen to his brain, doesn't answer it. He asks about circuit breakers instead. It is the last transmission anyone ever hears from Helios Flight 522. The aircraft keeps climbing. By 9:23, it levels off at its programmed cruising altitude, 34,000 feet, and keeps flying its planned route, on autopilot, alone. At 9:37, it enters Greek airspace with no one answering the radio. Air traffic control tries to reach it again and again. 19 separate attempts. Nobody answers. With no instructions, the autopilot does exactly what it was programmed to do. It enters a holding pattern over a radio beacon near Athens and starts flying in circles. At 11:05, 2 F-16 fighter jets scramble from a Greek airbase. Their job is simply to look. to find out, visually, what is happening on a passenger jet that will not answer anyone. On its sixth loop of the holding pattern, they catch up to it. What they see, through the cockpit windows, becomes some of the most quoted testimony in aviation history. The first officer's seat, slumped forward, motionless. The captain's seat, empty. Oxygen masks, dangling loose in the cabin behind them. No visible movement, anywhere. No sign of anything but silence. Everyone on that plane was not unconscious. A 25-year-old flight attendant, Andreas Prodromou, held something almost nobody in his job does, a real, valid UK commercial pilot's license. Not a rating for this aircraft, but real flight training, all the same. At 11:49, using a portable oxygen bottle, he makes it into the cockpit. He sits in the captain's now empty seat. The F-16 pilots see him. He briefly raises a hand toward them. Seconds later, the left engine flames out. The plane has run out of fuel. It leaves its holding pattern and starts to come down. The cockpit voice recorder captures 5 separate Mayday calls from Prodromou. Nobody at Athens air traffic control ever hears a single one. His radio is still tuned to Larnaca's frequency, hundreds of miles behind him. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Helios Airways Flight 522, Athens. At 11:59, the second engine flames out. At 12:03 and 32 seconds, the aircraft comes down in the hills near a town called Grammatico, 25 miles from Athens. 121 people were aboard, 115 passengers, 6 crew. All 121 were killed. There were no survivors. The official investigation ran for over a year. Greece's Air Accident Investigation and Aviation Safety Board published its final findings in October of 2006. Its stated cause, in order, the crew never recognized the pressurization switch was in manual. They never identified the real problem. And one by one, everyone but Prodromou lost consciousness to lack of oxygen. The report is careful and specific about something important. It does not pin this on one person, the switch, the identical warning horns, Boeing's own maintenance manual, which never explicitly told anyone to double-check that switch, and a flight crew who missed 3 separate chances to catch it themselves. One real direct result. Years later, air safety regulators ordered older 737S to be fitted with 2 distinct warning lights, so this exact confusion could never happen again. The technical report was never the end of this story. 2 separate criminal cases followed, in 2 different countries, against some of the same people. In Cyprus, 4 Helios executives stood trial for manslaughter. In December of 2011, a court acquitted all 4. Prosecutors appealed. Cyprus's Supreme Court voted to order a retrial. That retrial never happened. The same men were already being tried again, in Greece, for the same crash. In Greece, 3 of those men, the airline's CEO, its operations manager, and its former chief pilot, were convicted of manslaughter. 10-year sentences. Under Greek law, all 3 were allowed to pay their way out of prison instead, roughly 80,000 euros each. None of them served a single day. The ground engineer who left that switch in manual was also tried in Greece. He was acquitted on appeal. Of everyone charged in either country, he is the only person fully cleared of criminal responsibility. Helios Airways itself did not survive long, either. It kept flying for just days after the crash. In March of 2006, it rebranded entirely, dropping its old name. By that November, roughly 14 months after the crash, it had stopped operating completely. A monument and a small chapel stand today at the crash site near Grammatico, bearing all 121 names and photographs. Every year, families gather there, and separately in Cyprus, to remember them. As recently as August of last year, 20 years after the crash, families were still speaking publicly, their own words, on the record, that real justice was never served. A switch, left in one position instead of another. 2 warning systems that sounded identical. 3 missed chances to catch it. That is the entire, real chain that ended 121 lives. Nobody involved set out that morning to cause any of this. That is, honestly, the hardest part of this story to sit with. If a switch left in the wrong position can end a flight like this, wait until you see what one overlooked repair did to a different Boeing, 7 years later. That story is on this channel too. Subscribe to Black Box Breakdown so you don't miss what evidence turns up next.
If this one got under your skin a little, good. That's the point. And it only keeps happening because people like you keep showing up.
So do one thing for me. Hit subscribe. It is free, and it is the whole reason Black Box can keep taking these disasters apart.